urgent, and we need to move much and much faster. We're not on track for Paris, and that means that we're facing 3 costs already today. The cost of financing the transition, the cost of the physical impacts we're seeing. The third cost is how are we gonna cushion and shield ourselves to these physical impacts? So how are we gonna do the financing of the adaptation towards, and what are we adapting to?
So in terms of the biggest bottlenecks, I think, well, it is all about financing. It's the cost of financing. I think the availability of financing is not going to be the issue. Money is around, the world is flooded with money, but I think it is the cost and then the terms.
So I think we need to build this critical mass for change across the entire value chain.
And certainly the cost of capital, I think, is the one that I would focus attention on today, given where we are, because this is the main barrier that we see holding back capital from flowing to emerging markets where higher carbon, harder to abate industries need to decarbonize. There's a big spread there, and that needs to be compressed.
For our part of the world, the demand function is extremely important, right? That we need to help the demand function to drive the innovation and the demand for these products. And there is a keen interest to be able to invest in the global south. And I think that much of what large forward-leaning companies like Outokumpu is doing will probably affect that part of the world too, and especially where you source that iron ore, right? So in that context, I think that we're very well positioned, but there's not without challenges, and there are a few risks involved in this global north, global south issue that we need to sort out to really win the battle over climate volatility and change.
How do you see it? Do you have customers coming to you, I want to green, or how are you proactively engaging with your portfolio? Well, how mainstream is it?
Well, it's very mainstream, as in I don't think we have one customer dialogue today with a serious company that does not talk about how will I move, how can I move, right? And it all comes back to commercialization, right? This has to be commercially viable over time. So, right, so the thing for us is to find the metrics, the storyline of how to allocate, get capital to these investments, and by that move this forward. And then we adjust as we learn as well, right? And that's how you move an industry forward.
We see transition plans as emerging as potentially very useful mechanism for a company, especially in hard-to-abate sectors. A good transition plan that does look at the opportunities and the risks will be centered around financial performance and what are the economic value creators that the company has what are the levers that the company can activate in order to be a more resilient company as the structure of the economy around it starts to change, and perhaps even to lead in changing the structure of the economy. When it comes to the iron and the steel industry, we actually see a potential very important investment opportunity here for companies that are leading in the decarbonization of the sector. It's a matter of competitive advantage. It's a matter of capturing a new profit pool. We talk about there being a fast lane of the transition, which may be clearer. Electrification we brought up today, but that's also linked to hard-to-abate sectors. But then there are slower lanes. Emerging markets are generally in the slower lanes for the reasons we discussed, but harder-to-abate technologies as well, the food, the agriculture sector, and so on in the slower lane. Slower lane is not necessarily a bad thing. It means, sectors and industries can switch lanes. We actually think that there's a very important investment opportunity in higher carbon industries, which are an important part of the economy today, will be in the future. And maybe I can use an ice hockey metaphor here. I think I'm on safe ground to use one.
Yes, you are.
Careful though, because they know.
Yeah. But of course, our clients are interested in skating to where the puck is going to be, not where the puck was.
First of all, let me say that the way you have depicted it, Chris, works exactly for, I think, most financiers and for us as well. So when we look at sectors or industries or specific actors, what we want is to be able to help them accelerate the transition and achieve the impact, right? Just now, we have recently launched, and I know SEB, you have the same, we have set our own targets, science-based targets as a bank, sector by sector, which helps and facilitates that dialogue with all the clients that belong to that value chain.
And I must say that the development of IFRS S1 and S2 is something that is very close to my heart. And I would sincerely hope that you bring back from this conference to the Commission as well, the importance of having a common framework across the globe. I think that if we can concentrate on creating one global system where companies like Outokumpu compete also on the basis of providing data that is valuable for global investors, that would be sincerely helpful.
How can we make sure that the energy sector moves so we have the right energy to run our economy on net zero?
You mentioned subsidies, and I think for the time being, those are a critical factor for investments, in, especially switching your production for emission standards. Chancellor Scholz has proposed a climate club, which I think has been launched for the second time at this COP, meaning that 37 countries have pledged to find equivalent standards in terms of CO2 emission also for this industry. And I think this must be the way we are going, because otherwise we will not have a level playing field, and this will make it very difficult for the countries that are moving forward and also for the companies that are moving forward. In order for companies to green, they need green energy, in particular those that are energy intensive, meaning that they will need green electricity and they will need green hydrogen. So ramping up electricity, in particular wind and PV, is absolutely key.
In the SAF market, regulatory frameworks basically created demand. But that is basically creating a pull effect, and then companies create demand, supply. If you look at the steel industry, for example, take like a dishwasher. So there is no pull. So the consumer may want to buy, but there's no really effective pull mechanism. So my question really is, could the regulators, to facilitate this, put in place more systems to create demand pull? The supply will come, but where's the demand?
Because how quickly can we really get the supply for net zero energy ready to feed our economy? How do we speed that part up?
As far as ramping up wind and solar power in particular, because I think this will make up for the greatest share, there is already sufficient capital around. At least that's my impression. Depending on where you want to invest, what you do need is usually a grid access, which is reliable. And what you also probably need, depending on the region where you are investing, is some kind of state government guarantee for your investment against political risks in particular. Mm-hmm. What you also need, of course, is flexibility, meaning storage. That can be long-term storage in terms of hydrogen or short-term storage in terms of batteries. And what you do very much need is demand-side flexibility. But also talking about the consumer, and I think that's something that's difficult to accept for many who are buying an electric car or have a heat pump, that they will also need to align their consumption patterns with the demands of the grids.
So it requires some behavioral changes?
It does.
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
But, as Luca was mentioning, as we've heard here, there are sticking points which hold back even fast lane transitions, and siting, permitting, and grid access is probably the most significant one. The latest statistics I've seen suggest that of all the renewable energy capacity that exists in Europe today, there is that same amount plus an extra 20% which has been built or is nearly built but not yet connected to the grid. So permitting, siting, all of these different grid access, there will be no transition without transmission. I'll just say that there very clearly. as investors, what we're trying to do is to try and understand at what point do the tipping points really get triggered and these sticking points get overcome. We think that happens within the next decade, but we think the next decade will be, quite held back by sticking points, and then, just the economic impetus just gets so good, and the demand pull gets so strong that it accelerates.
As we're talking about long-term investment, how difficult is it in this era to get this longer term? Because I think you're looking into decades sometimes, right? What you're doing really with this transformation, or is it still very much focused on the short term?
Of course, we're trying from a commercial standpoint. Customers want to see results now.
Yeah.
Right. So of course we're trying to find ways how we can reduce emissions quickly. Energy efficiency is one way to do that. So we're investing a lot. The paybacks are, within 2 years. The IRR is very, very high if we can reduce or improve energy efficiency. Longer term, it's about what do you put into the model? I'm a little bit worried about the long term, the shape of the yield curve. Everybody thinks we're going to go back to this zero free money world. What if we don't go back to the free money world and the yield curve starts to steepen and the back end becomes very expensive? When we talk about the premium from the standpoint of the customer, so they will pay the premium if they get some benefits. Mm-hmm. And I go back to my earlier comment about customer pull. So the way we have tried to solve this is we go for maximum data transparency. We give the customers everything about our emissions we can honestly find, from how much our scope 1 is, scope 2, scope 3. We go to our suppliers, we tell them, to Brazil, to Colombia, tell me for this ferronickel, if I buy a ton, how much emissions? We calculate all of that together. We audit it by German auditors, TÜV, etc. And when you buy it, you get the data. And I think this is a fundamental question that if we provide going back to IFRS and CSRD, if companies are incentivized or regulated to provide the data, then we get going. Because how can the customer make any choice if he or she doesn't know what the emissions are?
And I'm totally with you there. I think for the disclosures, I hear caveats, but I do really see that it will bring a more meaningful, more reliable and more comparable data. And if you're looking into like the financial industry, this is what they would need to invest in. And especially avoiding the greenwashing side, make it really credible and making sure that you live up to your commitments.
But what I'm scared of is that we're always looking for the final solution, while we need those stepping stones until we get there. And at least in our view, carbon capture is not the final solution, but it's there today. And with the proper setting of the EU ETS prices, it will be very soon likely to be profitable for those easier industries where you can put them in, like waste incineration. And I think that we would be poorer if we didn't use them when they are available. And then over time, of course, not budge on the final hope that we can get rid of all the fossils that we actually can get rid of. But don't lock yourself into too complex, too expensive solutions and say no to the available ones.
In our transition scenario, we think technology will surprise to the upside. It's asymmetrically skewed, yes, so that the transition could accelerate through technology innovation, and it's very sudden. The change will happen slowly and then all at once. And I have to say, being here for a couple of days, including the Finland pavilion and seeing the technology innovation, I think we have a good opportunity for it to surprise to the upside. I've seen some amazing things, and I don't think engineers have even begun to direct their attention to this problem. And once they really do enforce, and it's starting to happen soon, and once the RD&D money is flowing into this space, we're going to see some very interesting innovations that could trigger tipping points.
My wish is that we get some of the slow lane movers into the fast lane. I think the technology will help. It will happen. As soon as we see some of this fish moving and accelerating, more will follow.
I think we're at the beginning of a huge S-curve. I think this is going to be a huge opportunity. A lot of money will be made because there will be a lot of big profit pools. I believe in three things. One is maximum information transparency in the supply chain. We're doing it, and we're going to do even more. Secondly, quick wins. A lot of things can happen. I agree with you, Hans. Anything delivered now will be cheaper than 10 years from this. And thirdly, my unsolved problem is, how do I create the demand?
We're leaving this panel with, let's keep it going and let's meet next year again and see where we stand.